Miss Pratt's voice cut through the gate area like a scalpel, precise, cold, and designed to part crowds. With her impeccable uniform, immaculate makeup, and posture that could shame a ballerina, she embodied Sky Global Airlines' premium image. Or at least, that's what Camille Pratt told herself each morning as she pinned her senior flight attendant wings to her lapel. The old woman at the front of the line barely seemed to register the instruction. "Ma'am," Camille repeated, louder this time, inserting herself between the elderly woman and the boarding gate. "General boarding will begin in approximately 20 minutes. First class is boarding now." The old woman blinked owlishly behind thick glasses. "Yes, I know." Her voice was soft but surprisingly clear, with the faintest hint of a southern accent. "That's why I'm in line." Camille's professionally maintained smile tightened at the corners. She'd been working premium cabins for 15 years and had developed a sixth sense for passengers who didn't belong. This woman, with her drugstore perfume and department store handbag, was definitely in the wrong line. "There seems to be some confusion," Camille said, her tone shifting to the exaggerated patience she reserved for children and the elderly. "This line is for our first-class passengers only. Perhaps you misread your boarding pass?" The old woman reached into her handbag and produced a boarding pass, extending it with fingers gnarled by arthritis. "I believe everything is in order, dear." Suspicion immediately replaced certainty. In Camille's experience, there were two possibilities. Either the old woman had been upgraded due to some computer error, or worse, she was trying to use someone else's boarding pass. "May I see your ID, please?" Camille requested, her tone now clipped with authority. With the same unhurried movements, the woman produced a passport and what appeared to be a Global Elite membership card, the highest tier in Sky Global's loyalty program. The name on both matched the boarding pass: Eloise Lancaster. Despite the evidence in her hands, Camille remained unconvinced. The cognitive dissonance between the woman's appearance and the premium credentials was too great to reconcile. In 15 years of working first class, Camille had developed clear mental categories for who belonged in the forward cabin: executives in tailored suits, celebrities in designer casual wear, wealthy retirees dripping with understated luxury. This woman, this Eloise Lancaster, fit none of those profiles. "Ms. Lancaster," Camille began, the formality doing little to mask her skepticism, "how did you come to be in possession of this particular ticket?" The question hung in the air, its impropriety evident to several nearby passengers who had paused their pre-boarding routines to watch the interaction. A middle-aged businessman in line behind Eloise frowned, clearly uncomfortable with Camille's interrogation. "I believe I purchased it," Eloise replied mildly, "though it's been some time since I've handled the actual transaction myself. My assistant usually takes care of such things." Camille's suspicion deepened. The story was becoming more implausible. This shabby old woman with a personal assistant? Unlikely. Years of experience had taught Camille that first-class cabins attracted opportunists and scammers looking for free premium travel. While most weren't as elderly as this woman, Camille prided herself on not being fooled by appearances. "I'm afraid I'll need to verify this with my supervisor," Camille announced, holding on to both the boarding pass and ID. "If you could step aside for a moment—" "I don't believe that will be necessary," Eloise interrupted, her soft voice somehow cutting through Camille's practiced authority. "The boarding process has begun, and I'd like to take my seat." She reached for her documents, but Camille instinctively pulled them back, just out of grasp. Something in the old woman's calm assertion of rights triggered a defensive response in Camille. A need to establish dominance over what she perceived as a challenge to her authority. "Ma'am, I determine who boards this aircraft," Camille stated firmly, "and I need to be certain you belong in first class." The businessman behind Eloise stepped forward. "Excuse me, but this is ridiculous. The lady has a valid boarding pass. What's the problem?" Camille flashed him a tight smile. "Sir, I'm handling this situation. Please step back." "It's all right," Eloise assured the man. "I appreciate your concern, but I can manage this. She turned back to Camille and extended her hand once more. My documents, please. When I've verified them, Camille insisted. Eloise sighed, a sound so weary it suggested this was far from the first time she'd faced such treatment. Young lady, I've been flying since before you were born. I have a valid ticket for seat 1A. I would like to board now. She reached again for her boarding pass and ID, and this time, when Camille pulled back, Eloise's motion continued forward, her arthritis-gnarled fingers grasping at air where the documents had been a moment before. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when reviewing the security footage, even Camille herself couldn't quite believe it. As Eloise reached forward, Camille's free hand came up in a sharp, reflexive movement, connecting with the old woman's extended wrist with an audible smack. The sound seemed to reverberate through the suddenly silent gate area. Eloise's cane clattered to the floor. Her small body swayed precariously, and for a horrifying moment it seemed she might fall. The businessman behind her quickly steadied her with a gentle hand at her elbow. Camille froze, her face draining of color as the reality of what she'd done crashed over her. In 15 years of service, through countless difficult passengers and stressful situations, she had never made physical contact with a passenger in anger or frustration. I'm sorry, she stammered, the carefully constructed facade of professional composure crumbling. I didn't mean to. Eloise rubbed her wrist, a small red mark already forming where Camille's hand had connected. Her expression wasn't angry, as Camille might have expected, or even hurt. Instead, it held something far more unsettling. Disappointment mixed with resolve. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Eloise said quietly. The words weren't delivered as a threat. There was no rage, no promise of retribution. Just a simple statement of fact, spoken with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what would follow. Before Camille could respond, a gate agent who had witnessed the entire exchange hurried over, his face ashen. Ms. Lancaster, I am so sorry. Please, let me help you to the aircraft immediately. He retrieved her cane, handed it to her with trembling hands, then turned to Camille with a look of pure horror. Miss Pratt, report to the station manager's office immediately. I don't understand, Camille protested, still clutching Eloise's documents. Who is... That, the gate agent hissed under his breath, is Eloise Lancaster, founder and chairman emeritus of Sky Global Airlines. The world seemed to tilt beneath Camille's designer heels. Eloise Lancaster. The name finally registered in its proper context, not as a random passenger, but as the legendary figure whose portrait hung in the company's headquarters. The woman who had started with a single prop plane in 1952 and built what was now the world's fourth-largest airline. The visionary who had pioneered female leadership in aviation decades before it was common. The philanthropist whose foundation provided scholarships to thousands of aspiring pilots and aviation professionals, including, ironically, the very program that had put Camille through flight attendant training 15 years ago. And Camille had just slapped her hand. I didn't know, she whispered, the inadequacy of the statement painfully obvious even as she uttered it. Would it have mattered? Eloise asked, echoing Camille's unspoken question to herself. If I were any other 90-year-old woman, would your behavior have been acceptable? Without waiting for an answer, Eloise turned to the gate agent. James, I believe we're ready to board now, and please return my documents to Miss Pratt's custody. She seems quite determined to verify them. James gently extracted the boarding pass and ID from Camille's now limp grip and returned them to Eloise. Of course, Ms. Lancaster. Right this way. As Eloise was escorted down the jet bridge, the businessman who had attempted to intervene gave Camille a look of undisguised contempt before following. Other passengers, those who had witnessed the exchange but hadn't recognized Eloise, now whispered among themselves, the story already morphing into the kind of travel nightmare anecdote that would circulate on social media within hours. Camille stood frozen at the gate, her career flashing before her eyes. 15 years of impeccable service evaluations, recognition for highest customer satisfaction scores on transatlantic routes, the pending promotion to purser she'd been expecting to receive next month, all potentially erased by a single impulsive action. "Miss Pratt!" The station manager had appeared beside her, his expression grim. "My office! Now!" The walk to the office passed in a blur. Camille's mind raced through possible explanations, justifications, apologies, none of which seemed adequate to address what had happened. By the time she was seated across from station manager David Reeves, she had settled on the truth as her only viable option. "I made a terrible mistake," she began, her voice barely steady. "I allowed my assumptions to cloud my judgment, and I behaved unprofessionally. There's no excuse for my actions." Reeves regarded her silently for a long moment. At 57, he had been with Sky Global for over 3 decades and had seen his share of employee misconduct. But rarely had he encountered something so clearly indefensible from a senior crew member with an otherwise spotless record. "The captain has requested you be removed from today's flight," he finally said. "A replacement is already on the way. But that's just the immediate consequence. I've been instructed to inform you that you're suspended pending a full investigation." Camille nodded, accepting the inevitable. "I understand. Do you?" Reeves asked, his tone sharpening. "Do you understand that in addition to assaulting a passenger, you've potentially damaged our company's reputation? That your actions violated not just company policy but possibly federal regulations regarding passenger treatment? That in today's world I guarantee someone recorded that interaction and it's probably online already." Each question hit Camille like a physical blow, stripping away the last vestiges of her professional pride. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Reeves sighed, some of the anger leaving his expression. "Normally, this would be immediate termination. However, Ms. Lancaster has specifically requested that the company handle this differently." Camille's head snapped up. "She has? Ms. Lancaster has asked that instead of termination, you be given the opportunity to restart your training from the beginning. First day entry-level training alongside new hires, many of whom will be half your age." The proposal was simultaneously a reprieve and a humiliation. To retain employment, but surrender 15 years of seniority. To sit in classrooms with fresh-faced newcomers who would inevitably learn of her mistake. To rebuild a reputation from scratch. "Why would she do that?" Camille asked, bewildered by the unexpected mercy. "Ms. Lancaster left a message for you," Reeves replied, sliding a sealed envelope across the desk. "She asked that you read it privately." Camille accepted the envelope with unsteady hands. "May I?" Reeves nodded and stood, moving toward the door. "Take your time. I'll be back in 15 minutes. By then, I'll need your decision about whether you wish to accept Ms. Lancaster's alternative or proceed with standard termination proceedings." Alone in the office, Camille opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The handwriting was shaky but legible, clearly penned by Eloise herself, rather than dictated to an assistant. "Miss Pratt, when I founded this airline in 1952, I was told repeatedly that I didn't belong in aviation, that a woman's place was not in the cockpit, the boardroom, or anywhere that involved making decisions about how passengers would travel. I was dismissed, belittled, and on more than one occasion, physically removed from spaces where men didn't believe I had the right to be. What saved me were the occasional individuals who chose to see beyond appearances, who judged me by my capabilities rather than their preconceptions. They were rare, but their impact was immeasurable. Today, you made a judgment based entirely on appearance. You saw an old woman in modest attire and decided she couldn't possibly belong in first class. When evidence contradicted your assumption, you doubled down rather than reconsidering. When challenged, you resorted to physical force, however slight, to maintain your position of authority. I am not asking for your termination because I believe that anyone can make a serious mistake. What matters is what follows that mistake. Some will defend, justify, and repeat their errors. Others will learn, grow, and become living examples of the change they needed to make. If you choose to remain with Sky Global, you will surrender your seniority and begin again as a new hire. You will serve in economy class for a minimum of 1 year before being considered for premium cabin assignments, and you will participate in developing new training materials about assumptions, biases, and passenger dignity. This path will be difficult. You will be humbled. Your colleagues will know of your mistake. You will lose the status you've worked 15 years to build. But you will not lose your career. And perhaps, in the rebuilding, you will discover something valuable about who you are and who you wish to become. The choice is yours. Eloise Lancaster, founder, Sky Global Airlines. Camille read the letter twice, then a third time, tears blurring the words as the full impact of both her actions and Eloise's response sank in. She had expected rage, demands for punishment, a scorched earth response to the disrespect she had shown. Instead, she had received something far more powerful, an opportunity to make amends through genuine change rather than mere apology. When Reeves returned to the office, he found Camille composed but noticeably different. The rigid perfectionism that had defined her professional persona replaced by something more contemplative. "I accept Ms. Lancaster's terms," she said without preamble. "All of them." The financial implications alone were staggering, a nearly 40% reduction in income, but Camille simply nodded her acceptance. "I understand, and thank you for this opportunity." "Thank Ms. Lancaster," Reeves corrected her. "This was her decision, not mine or HR's." "I intend to," Camille assured him. "Not today. I think we've both had enough for one day. But I will express my gratitude, and more importantly, I'll demonstrate it through my actions going forward." 3 days later, Camille Pratt walked into the Sky Global Training Center in Dallas, dressed not in her senior flight attendant uniform with its gold stripes and wings, but in the business casual attire required for new trainees. At 38, she was easily the oldest person in the room, surrounded by eager 20-somethings embarking on their dream careers. The lead instructor, checking attendance, paused noticeably at Camille's name before continuing down the list. Word had clearly spread. Throughout the day, Camille caught curious glances and overheard whispered fragments. "The one who slapped." Lancaster herself could have been fired. By lunchtime, Camille had resigned herself to being the cautionary tale of the training class. She sat alone in the cafeteria, picking at a salad and contemplating the long road ahead, when an unexpected figure appeared at her table. The directness was startling but somehow easier to accept than false kindness would have been. This wasn't about making Camille feel better. It was about ensuring she actually became better. She paused, allowing the message to sink in. "I don't expect you to be perfect, Miss Pratt. I expect you to be willing to question your assumptions, especially when they lead you to treat others as less deserving of dignity." Camille nodded, understanding blooming not just intellectually but emotionally. "I will do my best to live up to that expectation." "Good," Eloise said, rising slowly from her chair. "Because when you complete your year in economy, assuming your performance warrants it, I've requested that you be assigned to my regular flight rotation." The implication was clear. Eloise would personally witness whether Camille's transformation was genuine or merely expedient. "I'll look forward to proving myself," Camille said with surprising conviction. Eloise offered a small smile, the first Camille had seen from her. "As will I, Miss Pratt, as will I."